So
Awesome.
thank you so much for joining me on this.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
All right, so we're going to kind of dive into it a little bit. For those of you joining, holy cow, we're like getting quite a few joining right away. So awesome.
Sweet.
This is awesome.
Sweet.
I've been getting a ton of messages about this, Liandra. People have been
Good.
really, really excited about this interview.
Awesome.
So I'm gonna kind of put you on a podium for a minute. So just to let you know,
Okay.
so if you've ever met Liandra or have seen her about, the reason why I wanted to bring her on is, I got to meet her a few weeks ago in Salt Lake City, and this was a very interesting thing. When Liandra enters a room, there's this weird vibe, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And this is why we are having her on today, is you get women that are, obviously going to look at me women. And then you get women that are obviously very insecure. And then Liandra enters the room. And I believe in giving credit where credit is due. So this is where you're getting credit where credit is due. Is Liandra enters a room, and it is a very different vibe. And it is the vibe of a fucking queen. She don't give a shit if you like her outfit. She don't give a shit if you are looking or not. She don't give a shit if you talk to her or not. And it is a very interesting vibe. One that I think some women are very attracted to. Other women are almost kind of in fear of it. And I'm sure the same as it goes for men. So we are bringing her on today to discuss. She has the podcast From the Ashes, Reclaiming You. We're bringing her on to discuss a very particular topic that I've been wanting to go over for quite some time, but I needed the right individual to go over it. So without further ado, Miss Liandra Samproni. And Liandra, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wow, thank you for that introduction. That was more than I expected. My name is Liandra, and I am a divorced mom. I've got 2 kids. My daughter's 14, and my son is 12. I'm a multi-business owner, bikini competitor. Like, my life has changed because of some of the coaching groups I've joined in the last few years. And who I am now is not who I was just a short while ago. I have completely changed myself, improved my life, just based off of the people that I surround myself with. It's been a game changer.
Perfect,
So,
perfect. And you own a couple businesses.
I do. I have an RV park, and I have a barn restaurant. I had a bakery that I sold. I had a food trailer that I sold. So I've had several, and I'm trying to whittle that down to narrow my focus a little bit better.
Awesome. And then you run this podcast, From the Ashes, Reclaiming You. Last night I spent a few hours listening to different podcasts that you have. I haven't made it through all of them yet, but
Nice.
absolutely outstanding. You
Thank you.
really take on some topics that most, and I know you've gotten some rebuttals with it as well, because of the topics that you cover coming from women.
Yeah, some of the things that we talk about are really hard to hear. And I believe in being completely honest and transparent, and not just patting someone on the ass when they need, not necessarily a punch in the face, but maybe a real honest look in the mirror at themselves and their insecurities or their imperfections, where they can be better. That's where we can all make improvements, is just being true and honest to ourselves.
Right. And kind of in today's culture, you see the whole alpha and beta thing being thrown around a lot.
Yes.
And I know in your podcast with Rich Cooper, you guys covered this pretty extensively.
Mm-hmm.
But, everybody wants to claim to be an alpha male or an alpha female, when in reality, you look at the individual, it couldn't be further from the truth.
Right.
And so I've kind of developed this mentality from my coaching group, the Royal Council, is, throughout history, there's been kings and queens.
Mm-hmm.
But really, our society has become a bunch of spoiled princesses, and you got a bunch of the spoiled prince running around. pretending to be king and queen.
Right.
And like you said, you weren't always like this. So at some point in time, you know, I believe people can go back and forth between that beta and that true alpha mentality. And kind of going into that today, you know, specifically addressing with women, what is the difference with, what do you find the difference between being a beta woman, alpha woman, or spoiled princess versus queen? It's really the same thing. It's just different terms.
I think a lot of it comes down to holding yourself accountable and keeping this standard or this bar for yourself high and keeping yourself in check. So many times when women are dating nowadays, they expect the man to be a 10, right? He's got to be rich and have this amazing body. He's got to have everything. But then she doesn't have to do all that. She can be out of shape. Everyone's going to love her no matter what, which you have value no matter what. Yes, but hold yourself to a high standard, be your best, do your best, and then you can expect the best from somebody else. I don't know if this is like a society thing, but too many times we're told that we don't have to put in the work, that we should be loved no matter what. Yes, but you should still be being your best and doing your best. That's the difference between a queen and maybe a princess. The princess just expects it all to be handed to her, and the queen will, number one, work for it, but then she also knows her value and can prove her value based off of who she is and what she does.
So at any point in time in your life, maybe prior to the divorce, after the divorce, would you have considered yourself more of this beta princess at some point in time?
Oh yeah. Even after the divorce, I thought I was some hot shit. And I thought that any man should want me, right? Which is the same mentality that so many women have, and probably men nowadays too. But once I started making, like in the dating world, I made a list of the things I wanted in a man. And I was like, wow, I need to be those things. Like, in order to find that man, I'm not just going to be looking for him. I need to embody those same attributes. And if I want someone who's financially secure, I need to be financially secure. So actually going through that list did really well for me, because I became all of those things and then attracted that man because I was all of those attributes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And kind of curious, you know, because, and I'll get into this of where this is going, but like when you started dating and when you met are you now remarried or?
No, we're in a long-term relationship, so
Okay,
it's my
okay.
boyfriend.
So when you met this individual, did you go after him? Did he go after you? How did that work?
So ironically, we met on a dating app, which like I feel like everybody does now. I had this mentality that the man should always chase me. I would never message first, right? When I saw his profile, I was like, oh, he's funny, and I'm just going to send him a message. So I broke my rule and reached out to him first. And that's when things kind of shifted. And I think that's also, maybe that also like boils down to the princess thinking that everybody should come to her, which pursuit is another part of the dating game, and that is very important too. But it should be reciprocal. Like, you should show effort, and this goes both ways in the dating world. I also think that expecting a man to pay for everything is so like 50 years ago. Like, if you are making money, which you should be an equal contributor to this relationship. And that's one thing that he's so traditional, but we still kind of playfully battle with that. I will take his card when he puts it out to pay for dinner, and I will put my card down, and we will have this playful banter with it. But I think it's important to be an equal partner and contributor to the relationship.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that and that happened because I have a very, very large rule that I set for myself after my divorce. And the rule is I have to be worth the trip.
Okay.
Because I was in a relationship, it was very beta-tized, and which is my own fault. But what I realized is I have to be worth the trip, as in it has to be both ways.
Yes.
And if I am not worth the trip, now if you prove to me that you're worth it, like I'm worth the trip, I will go into the earth. I'm going to reciprocate it. But if I'm not worth the trip, then I'm out.
Yeah. It's got to be a fuck yes, right? Otherwise it's not worth your time.
Well, and it's funny because I don't know if you've ever read John Eldridge's Wild at Heart.
No.
I highly, highly recommend it.
Okay.
And he talks about how every man wants to seek adventure. Every man wants to rescue the princess from the castle and battle the dragon.
Right.
And I took this to another level. I was like, yeah, but at some point in time, no man has ever battled for some princess or whatever in a castle, not knowing the princess first. At some point in time, that princess had made the engagement prior for him to go, it's worth battling the dragon.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I struggle with the whole princess thing as, I don't want to say like as an alpha woman, but as like a woman who's got my shit together. I don't want to ever be a damsel in distress. Like, it makes me crazy when I have to ask for help. And I know that's probably a good thing. It's got its perks and its pros and cons, But that's like a Disney princess thing that's like fucked our brains over the years.
Yes.
Like,
yes,
you need a man
amen.
to save you. Well, no, you really don't. And trying to teach my daughter that is, it's hard. Like, I want her to be independent, but at the same time, when that man comes along and she actually does need help, I want her to accept that help when she needs it. So it's this balance, trying to teach independence but still softness.
Right. And I'm going to get into the parenting thing here shortly. Before we do, because with women that are kind of in that beta way, because what I have learned in the dating world is that you learn your most about what women actually want by asking women. If you ask men, I mean, for the most part, we're retarded apes in a lot of ways. We really are. And you might get a couple points, but men just don't tend to communicate like that. But if you want to figure out new perspectives of going, okay, why is something not clicking? You ask a woman. And so what's that?
I was going to say, but sometimes women, it depends on who you're asking, they'll say one thing and they'll mean something completely different. Like, we are, as women, we are liars, and not really intentionally, but like, if you ask a woman, hey, where do you want to eat? She's going to be like, oh, I don't care. She really does. She just wants you to like make a decision, and then she can say yes or no, right?
Some brilliant man opened up a restaurant somewhere Midwest or East Coast, and the restaurant's called I Don't Care.
That's smart. That's really smart.
Brilliant man. Anyways, though, so what would be some red flags if, when a man is dating and he's past I call it the hoe phase. Okay. He's past the hoe phase and he's wanting to look more for a long-term relationship. What kind of red flags is it that he should be looking for?
So what should the man be looking for? Okay, red flags in women. I go along with Rich Cooper on this part. He talks about daddy issues being a big red flag, and I agree with that. I think if a girl has problems with her dad, doesn't have a good relationship with her dad, maybe he's never been in her life, she's not going to respect that same relationship for her children or future children with their father. And she's not going to see the value in that man being in the children's lives, even if there's divorce or if they're together. I know lots of women who their parents are married, but their dad's never there, and they don't see that value and the necessity for him to be there. So daddy issues is a big one. Um, oh, I'm trying to think what else. He also talks about tattoos being a big red flag. I don't think that's a thing because that would make me a walking red flag, which maybe I am. But I do think a woman needs to be independent and still, like, she's got to have something to strive for in life, right? Something to work towards. If she's not doing something with her life, she will get bored. I think that girls, this is going to sound awful. I think that girls, when they don't have a hobby, they don't have something to strive for, they start nitpicking at their man. They're either worried about who he's following on Instagram, they are going through his phone, they're stressing about all this stuff. And you need a hobby. You need something to work towards in your life and occupy your time with. Your man should not be your life. And that, to me, that's a big red flag.
Definitely agree completely. So when you're raising children, you have a girl and a boy from the mother's point of view, because we have a ton, we have generations of men and women being raised by single mothers.
Yeah.
And we've seen the long-term effects of that is it just simply doesn't work.
Right.
So as a mother, what do you do? How are you raising your children to be future queens and kings?
So even being divorced, it's really important that my children have a good relationship with their dad and that they are with him an equal amount of time as they're with me. In the divorced world, you see so many kids that, they see their dad every other weekend, which is bullshit. Like, as a mom, as a woman, I cannot teach my son how to be a man. Therefore, he needs to have a good relationship with his dad. He needs to be around his dad. He needs to do masculine things. So, like, in the last few years since the divorce, he has a dirt bike now. He's learning how to shoot guns. He's doing these manly things, which I love. And I think that's so important. Even my daughter, she was going through some issues post-divorce and some counseling, and we got all that straightened out. But that actually strengthened her relationship with her dad. And I see the value in that because it can create problems down the road if they don't have that. And my family, my parents are still married, so I've never had to deal with divorce or the repercussions of it, but I've seen that in other friends and children. And this can create generational trauma and problems that will just continue until we stop it. And although my kids are part of that statistic, being a divorced family, I still think that they're in a good place, like mentally, and with both of their parents being part of their lives in an equal time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's 3 states now in the United States that have gone to 50-50 equal shared parenting as the default. And the research, I think the first one I believe was Kentucky. And the research is showing that academically they do better, socially they do better, family environment they do better, and it's a night and day difference.
Yeah, well, and you even look at all these mass shootings that we have. I think it was like 90% of them grew up without their fathers. Like, that's where so many of these societal issues boil down to, is that loss of the family nucleus, right? Like, these dads are not around, so these boys don't have a masculine figure to look up to, and they're missing that. They're craving that. That's where we fix this. The men don't leave, because a lot of men just bail. But second of all, we don't we don't take our children from their dads either. It takes both sides.
It does. It does. Now, what's you mentioned a lot about the role in your son's life with his father and developing that masculinity. But
Mhm.
what's the role with having the father in the daughter's life? Like, where's the importance of that?
Well, like we were talking about with the daddy issues and the red flags, that's, you may not see like that big of a difference right now, but down the road, I also think with her, she's 14 and she's dating, which makes me crazy. Dating, whatever it is in high school, right? But she also will take that relationship with her dad and see how a man should treat her in the future, right? So if her dad's not there, she's going to think, well, she doesn't know, she doesn't have any expectations of what a man should be in a relationship. And same thing with me and dating. I know she's watching what kind of men I bring into my life and what I allow and how I show up in a relationship as an example. Like our kids are sponges. They pick up everything that we do. They see everything, they hear everything, and then they emulate that, they copy that. And I think it's important to be that example in everything, but especially dating. Like, show them what love looks like, show them what a healthy relationship is. And that's what they're going to know. That's what they're going to try to copy in the future.
I agree. It's funny, being in the dating world. There's always that, when do you introduce them? You don't want to create a revolving door,
Right.
right? And you don't
Right.
want that. But
Right.
one thing, and the path I've chosen, at least for the time being, is I don't introduce them, but I
Mm.
do talk about who I'm dating.
Oh, good.
And so my girls will know the name of the individual, and what they see is when I'm discussing this and I'm talking about this and these individuals, that if we break up, which obviously, like I'm still, dating, but if we break up, then they all always ask, well, why?
Mm.
And I take the time to explain it to them. More the older ones. My 6-year-old is like doesn't really care,
Right.
but especially my 13-year-old, she's going to be 14 this next month, and she's starting to date. And what I'm trying to instill in them is be picky.
Oh, good.
Be
Good.
picky. Hold yourself to a high standard, and if they don't meet those standards, move on,
Right.
and that's perfectly okay.
Right.
It doesn't mean they're a bad person or anything like that. It just means they weren't for you.
Yes. Yeah. And talking about compatibility, like compatibility is very important. And you're not going to be compatible with everyone. And that's okay. Like it doesn't mean you're bad or they're bad. Like it is just, it's not a fit. And it's okay to move on after that.
Exactly, exactly. And yeah, I've actually never ran that by a woman before, so I was kind of curious to see what your thoughts of it as it being a mom and going, because then they go home and 2 months later it's like, oh, Dad's talking about this girl instead of this girl, and
Oh, yeah.
it kind of creates that image because they're not around of, well, okay, he's just creating this revolving door. Well, no, I'm not bringing him in, but I talk about my dating life openly. And
Right. Well, I think it was a TikTok not that long ago that was talking about how we date nowadays and how it's training us for divorce, which it kind of blew my mind, but I see what this guy was saying. He was like, well, if you're dating and then you're just breaking up every time somebody's not the right one, then it's just easy to move on from somebody. And I was like, that's really interesting. Like maybe we should be vetting people more before we get involved. And I think when you're dating, it's really important to start a friendship first, right? And one thing that came to my mind, well, actually, I think somebody said it, is looking at the person that you're dating. Would you be friends with them if you weren't in a relationship? And I think that's a huge thing because I can look back at past relationships and be like, no, I would not be friends with you if we weren't dating. Like that's really important. Being
yeah, that's a
being just
valid
a
point.
yeah, like, is this a good person that you would just actually be friends with without the romantic side? So,
Right, right. And and I think that kind of revolves back to, or circles back to the point of the spoiled princess or the queen
hmm,
in a lot of ways. Because if it's that spoiled princess, it's like, no, you weren't doing enough for me, I'm out, and then they're not friends with them.
right.
Versus, yeah, the queen, someone who runs a kingdom, whether your kingdom is the size of a, 2-bedroom apartment, or, an entire state, or what have you,
Hmm.
your community, it's going to be how you treat people even after the fact.
Yes.
And are you still friends with them? And that can be kind of a weird topic.
Well, and how a relationship ends, I always find fascinating because who you are, I don't know, if you love someone, you're still going to want the best for them, right? Even if you're not together. And I think it's so funny when people are like, oh, I love this person. And then they break up. They're like, ah, fuck him. I'm like, yo, you just love this person. How can you go from like, hey, I love you to I hate you? You really didn't love them if that's the case, you know?
Right, right. I had a friend of mine once tell me that love and hate are the exact same emotion,
Hmm,
and
interesting.
that you can't really sit on the fence. If you sit on the fence, it's just going to tear your soul in two.
Wow.
But if you pick one or the other. And I know, going through my divorce, it would have been very easy to come out of it. Just, I hate her.
Mm-hmm.
I hate her. And I see this all the time with divorced couples. And
Yep.
yeah, they talk shit, they gossip, they just want to make that other person's life miserable. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the children see that. Long term, the children see that, and that
Yes.
can fuck the children up.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, it was probably about 3 weeks prior to the finalization of my divorce when this information was given to me. And I stewed on it for a couple of weeks. And I remember I was sitting up in bed one night and I was like, I choose to love her. No matter what, I
Mm.
choose to love her. I might not like her all the time,
Right.
but I'm going to love her, and I'm not going to venture from that. And that made that completely, that next day I woke up, my entire outlook had changed. The weight on my shoulders had been removed.
Mm.
And it was, and like that, and that's what I help teach people. And really what it came down to was what you mentioned at the very first of the interview, is that accountability.
Yeah.
I was not a perfect husband. I had fucked up more times than I realized. And, like, going forward, as, living on my own now, and is every night before I go to bed, I make sure the dishes are done. I make sure
Mm.
the bed is made in the morning, first thing. That's the
Yep.
very first task of the day. You fail to do that, you're failing.
Yes, I agree.
You'd have the best day in the world, and guess what? You're still coming home to a messy room.
Hmm.
And so and as a man, you start going, man, I really did not do enough of this in my marriage.
Yeah. Well, and when a relationship ends, especially in divorce, it's really important to look at the role that you played because we all have a part in that, no matter how it ended, right? And until you can actually look in the mirror and see your part in it, you're going to continue those same patterns and those same relationships. Like this will be a cycle that you continue to go through until you stop and you're like, okay, what part did I play? Like therapy has been a huge help for me with that. Like knowing my own toxic traits. Like we're all fucked up, right? But realizing and owning your part in the divorce, I think is so important too. Otherwise, you just keep continuing that pattern.
I had a girl I was dating 3-4 months ago, and we hadn't been dating long. And I probably should have waited before I told her this because it's probably a little too early on. But I said, well, one day we were talking about exes and stuff, and as most people that have been through it do, it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of becomes a regular thing.
Yep.
And we're talking. I said, well, the thing is though that we have to realize is everybody is a peanut allergy to someone.
Yeah.
And she goes, "You're calling me a peanut allergy." And I'm like, "To your ex, yes."
Right, right.
And the quicker that we can recognize that and go, well, we're a peanut allergy in a relationship. We can be friends, but we're a peanut allergy in a relationship.
Right. This is just not working otherwise.
Exactly. And when a person can recognize that they're really the peanut allergy to that other individual
Hmm.
and take that ownership, it really doesn't matter what the other person is doing.
Yeah, that's really hard for some, like even going through divorce, it takes a lot to get to that point though.
It does. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. And truthfully, a lot of people are lazy and don't want to do it. But they will continue to repeat the mistakes until it's like, okay, I got to wake up. Like, what's the
Yeah.
common denominator here?
It's really easy to blame somebody else. Yeah, so easy.
Definitely. And the reason why I mention all of this is I knew you had a teenage daughter.
Hmm.
Mine is 13, and I'm a single, non-custodial dad.
Okay.
So, and during the summers, I get them every other week. And during the school year, it's every other weekend. So I see them 4 or
Oh,
5 days a
wow.
month,
Oh,
and that's it.
man.
And we live in the same town. It's brutal, and
Wow.
and it is. And the thing is like trying to raise. I have 3 daughters. Trying to raise them into strong, independent women without
Hmm.
daddy issues.
Hmm.
That I'm like, well, how in the hell do I do that? I'm hardly around.
Yeah, that's hard. That's just because that's how your state is set up for divorce and custodial things?
Unfortunately, yes. I went
Okay.
for 50-50, and Wyoming is not a very 50-50 friendly state.
Damn, that's crazy. So when I talk to Rich Cooper, that's one thing that he advises men is, well, first of all, he says don't get married. But
Yeah,
second of all, he
I
says
love
if
that part.
he says if you're going to get married in a state that doesn't screw over divorced fathers,
Hmm.
like California, anywhere you go that's I don't even know which states are, but I know here in Nevada, like we didn't have to fight for 50-50, and I never put up a fight. I wanted my kids to be with their dad as much as they were with me. And having my kids every other week has been a blessing. It's actually been really great because when they're with me, I can focus on my kids. And then when they're with their dad, I can focus on me. Like it's this like part-time parenting. It sounds awful, but it's really beneficial. And I think it's good for the kids too. I think it's the best case scenario for the kids post-divorce because then they actually get to spend equal amounts of time with each parent.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And that's yeah, it's one of the things within my business that one of these days long term goals definitely working towards changing because it's you
Yeah,
take the power away from because when people go through divorce they usually act like children, both parties do,
they do.
and it's the children that suffer, and I'm a firm believer that broken people raise broken children.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if, we want to raise strong future generations of independent leaders, then we have to do our part and we have to put
Hmm.
our crap to the side.
Yep, and we have to fix ourselves. Like that's what it all boils down to is self-accountability and holding that bar, holding that standard high.
So if I could put you on a podium in front of 3 million women, okay,
Okay.
that's the situation. You're on this podium and you're going to speak to them. We have this entire full feminist movement going full bore right now.
Yeah.
Okay, and we can focus on how to do a math problem wrong all day long, or we can focus on the way to do it correctly.
Hmm.
What is the feminist movement doing correctly?
I think it started out really good and it got us a lot of equal rights, equal pay. Um, I think that's been wonderful. Letting women be on the same playing level with men when it comes to that kind of thing. I think that's a step in the right direction. That's been a good thing.
Absolutely. So, what are the things that they're doing currently that are correct for our children? Because I
Um,
say, and I ask this because you talk to different people, and they really go from black and white, one end of the spectrum or not, instead of going, okay, these are the things that are working.
mm, I
And
think,
I have a lot of men followers that are going through divorce or post divorce that are in that, he-man woman hater phase.
yeah, yeah, that's really
Okay, and
toxic.
so this is why I bring this up, is because I want to bring acknowledgement to the things that are going correctly. And then
Mm,
then maybe focus and mention a couple things that it's going, okay, no, this isn't going to work long term.
right. Um, I think it's showing our daughters that they can be anything, right? They don't have to stay at home. They don't have to, like, they can actually go out and be, as much as I hate our vice president, like they can be vice president of the country. And like there's nothing holding them back. I think that's a really good part of the feminine movement, right now.
Awesome, awesome. So yeah, these are a few of the questions that I had, that were just after watching your podcast, several. I got made it through the Rich Cooper one, toxic traits in women, toxic traits in men,
Yeah.
and it was outstanding, and so I wanted to bring up some of these, now with men raising children
Hmm.
as a woman. What are toxic traits in fatherhood that you see that you're just like, listen, this does not work long term?
Oh, I don't know if it's just men, because it's probably women and men. I think you can't be talking shit on your ex. Um, Men need to actually be in the home and not necessarily like doing the chores, like it just depends on how you guys have things set up. But I think that sometimes toxic masculinity, quote unquote, looks like abuse and control. Um, that whole like dominating, like I'm the man, I'm gonna, show that I'm the man. You don't have to do that. Like a true alpha doesn't have to say he's an alpha. He doesn't have to beat his chest. Like he just has that confidence in him. I think that men need to know how to protect their families, whether that means in a physical way, um, financially. We need our men to be the leaders of the home again, and so many times we as women take that from them because of it starts in little things like they we start mistrusting them in little things and then try to take over that masculine role, that alpha role in the family. And that's not where we belong. That's not where we thrive the most. We are the nurturers. We can still be strong and feminine, but we need the men to actually be the men. And it's you can see it in every day.
And I agree with you. Like when the trust has been broken, and or some mistrust is formed, and that control starts to speak up. You and Rich Cooper talked about this, and I saw another little snippet of one of yours somewhere where you were talking about this. Is Rich Cooper mentions the betaization through a thousand
Mm-hmm.
concessions,
Yeah.
and you mentioned that, yeah, women will test and test, and
Yeah.
will it move, and will it move, and what can we get away with? But then that creates a very toxic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're and which ultimately leads to the kids see this. And if you're in a marriage and it has created this kind of toxic relationship where, the roles have been kind of reversed due to mistrust, as a woman, what are you wanting to see out of the man? Like, how do you let go of that control to start allowing for that trust to be formed again?
It's going to take a lot of reprogramming for sure. I think it's important to actually have that conversation with the man and be like, look, I see what I've done. I see that I'm kind of taking control and you've allowed me to take control, but I want you to lead. I want you to be the man and put me like we as women, we want to be dominated as, and not even sexually if you want to get there, but we want to I have respect for a man when he can put me in my place or say, hey, stop it. Like you're being silly, or, he won't put up with my shit. That's where like we will test men to see what we can get away with, kind of like a kid almost. And where that boundary lies. And then it's up to the man to be like, this is where I am, and not letting us push that boundary over time. How to get back to that though, if you've gotten beyond, it's gonna take some practice, and letting him control, and you get to step back, because it's not your job. It's not your job to be in control.
So, and that's interesting because I know you did a little snippet on the parallel parenting versus co-parenting. I had Celia James on a while back. We discussed this in pretty great detail. Mm-hmm. And, in co-parenting situations, I mean, you have motherhood gatekeeping. The mm-hmm. job is to nurture and protect the child.
Yeah.
The man's job historically is protect the family mm-hmm. as a whole. And you have that motherhood gatekeeping, which is ultimately controlling. It's, it's kind of controlling the situation, making sure that the kids are safe. And when you split, you have to develop that trust that you don't have control, and that you're trusting that other individual when you're not around to make correct decisions with the children.
Yeah, but what is control? None of us have control. That is a facade that, I don't know, we think we have control. We really have zero control. And when you realize that control is just this dream we all think we have, it's so much easier just to let things go and let things flow, and not to hang on so tightly and try to make something happen the way that we think it should. When you're parallel parenting, that has given me so much peace. Like, I was fighting to co-parent, quote unquote, co-parent, and I wasn't getting anywhere. Like, we're supposed to work together. Why are you not talking to me? Why are you not texting me? And when I finally let go of that, and I was like, you know what? My kids are healthy. My kids are safe. My kids are happy. I'm going to do my thing. You can do your thing. And that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to fit this structure of co-parenting that we're told it's supposed to be. It can maybe get there one day, but right now it's not working. So let's do our own thing. And like, my ex and I do not talk, which maybe that's good, maybe that's bad, but that's how we're doing it. And I'm okay with that. Like, my kids are good. They're in a good spot right now. And that's all I can ask for.
Definitely. My parents got divorced when I was in early years of college. And my parents to this day don't talk. It took me being on my deathbed before they had a conversation.
Oh, wow.
And I can tell you that long run, I think it works if both parents are respectful of the ex-parent, or the ex-spouse, I should say. Mm-hmm. If they're respectful of it, and then I think it can work. If they're not, and they do a lot of bashing, then it doesn't work. Because I had a judge once tell me that children have two sides of their heart, a mother's side and a father's side. And they might not say anything to you, but if you bash their father, it stabs that father's side of the heart. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. And so he goes, you keep this in mind when you're working with people, and it's really easy to bash. Well, then go to your friends, vent to your friends. But if you do it in front of, then ultimately it creates a lot of issues down the road. My perfect, picture in my mind of co-parenting is, I don't really care to talk to my ex on a daily basis. I don't. Mm-hmm. But if we could do birthdays and events together, I think that would be beneficial.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
I do think that would be beneficial. You can be cordial. You don't have to be best friends, but you can be cordial and create, somewhat of a friendship of some sorts. And I think that it shows a lot of healthy traits going forward for children. So that, like we talked about, like if you break up with someone, you can still be friends with them. It just didn't work.
Right.
But, if we don't lead by example through that, then how are we, how can we expect them to do it?
Yeah. So my kids are in sports, and one thing that I would love to see, and I've seen other divorced parents do this, they eventually like are all on one side of the gym, dad and stepmom and mom and stepdad and all the grandparents, like they're all on one side cheering for the kids, and in my situation, it's always me, and then my ex is on the other side with his family, and the kids kind of have to bounce between. But when you're talking about, the parents talking shit on each other, those kids think and they know that they are half of their mom and half of their dad. So when you're talking shit on their dad, you're talking shit on them. That's how they're going to take it. And you're saying how their dad's a bum, and they're like, oh, well, I'm just like dad, so that must mean that I'm a bum too. Like you can't do that. As much as you may have disdain for that person, it's not your kids that need to hear that. And actually, you probably shouldn't even be talking about it to anybody, because I'm a firm believer in like the energy that you put out, you get back. So if you want to have this positive view of your ex, I would start talking about the good things about them, even if it's to your kids or to your family or just to yourself. Like, journal about, hey, what am I grateful for? What about my ex is a good thing? What are the good qualities about him or her? And start focusing on those things. Then maybe you're not going to be focusing on all the shit that they do or everything that they do wrong, because that's so easy to do.
And a tactic, it was a tactic strategy. To me, it's more of a habit, I guess, when I think about it. And I did this for a while. I haven't done it in a while, which is kind of shame on me. But one thing I found very helpful is I would send their mother a text of appreciation.
Mm.
And especially through the divorce, when it was really rough, I honestly did not have a lot of things to be appreciative of.
Yeah.
And I would have to sit and stew. There was times I'd spend 45 minutes, an hour trying to think of one little thing that I could say.
Right.
And no matter how small, and I will say that helped tremendously for me. I noticed that the relationship got a lot smoother. The ability to communicate it's like you said, it's really easy to point that finger and pick apart things, but sending that appreciation, at least they're going, well, okay, he does see the good things I'm doing. He just doesn't think I'm this horrible person.
Right. Well, and I think that's important to do the appreciation text as long as it is authentic. Like,
yes.
Don't be like, oh, I'm so grateful for XYZ when I'm really not. Like, no, just be completely real about what you're grateful for. Don't be fake about it,
Yeah, and they always came at random. It was not a daily task of mine. It was I tried to do it at least once a week, to where
That's
it was
good.
like, okay, take the time to really think about this, and what is something real. If I couldn't come up with anything real, and I was wasting my entire day trying to think of it, then it was like, okay, there's nothing real this week,
Right.
and move on. But yeah, you talk about the co-parenting, and it's funny how people that have gone through it, they've always wanted to be a little bit better. And, the bashing, parents slip. And so for anybody watching this, you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be times you get frustrated, your kids see it, you slip up, and then you go to bed that night, go, wow, I really should not have done that.
Yeah.
It does happen. And it's
Yes.
very, very normal. And really, you wake up the next morning and you apologize to the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And you let him know that it was inappropriate of you to do that.
Yeah. Yep. And your kids, it makes them uncomfortable when they hear their parents talking shit on each other. Like, I've seen it in my own kids, and you've just got to be really aware of what you're saying, how you're saying it, who you're talking about things in front of. Like, it's all really impactful.
Right. No, this is it's we ended up kind of going into some. My brain is just sitting here thinking of this entire conversation, because it's just very interesting when we're raising children and trying to raise strong leaders
Mm-hmm.
to go be independent and be strong. And it's a very interesting paradigm that there's so many moving parts that there really
There
isn't
are.
a right answer. Hold
So
on
I
one
think
second.
that I think the best way though is not, I'm going to raise my kids to do this. You need to just be that. If you want your kids to be independent, be independent. If you want them to be strong, be strong. If you want them to be healthy, be healthy. Like, we are the best example of what we want them to be. And you can be preaching to them everything that you want, but not doing it, and it's not going to make any difference.
Right. I mean, how many times have you told your 14-year shared some wisdom, some like golden nuggets you don't share with anybody else to your daughter? And she goes, yeah, okay, mom,
Oh yeah, all the time.
all the time.
Yeah.
But if you lead and you do it, they start picking up on it.
Oh, dude, my daughter, talking about dating, she's like, Mom, I know that I need words of affirmation and I need quality time. And I'm like, oh, yes, okay. Like, if I knew that at 14 years old, game changer. Like, it would change so many things. But they absorb it, they pick it up, and they understand things the older that they get.
Definitely, definitely. So, kind of, I don't want to keep you too long, but any kind of closing advice for moms out there, men out there that are raising children, and things that you've gone through, and really what you look for when raising your kids, things that you're hard on yourself about, that you could be like, this is a little golden nugget that I figured out I was doing and I didn't realize I was doing.
I really think it's important to give kids independence. Trust them to stay home alone or to cook their own food. Like, it's our job as parents to teach them how to survive without us, right? Because one day, please, I hope they move out and they go live on their own. And I want them to be self-sufficient way before then. I don't want to be like, oh my God, you're a senior in high school and now I need to teach you all these things. No, like, my kids, thank God we live in a small town. They're able to walk around town with their friends. They drive the RZR up in the mountains. Like, I trust them to do this. I've given them these little bits of freedom over time, and they've handled them well. So then I'll give them a little bit more freedom. But I think that's important too, to raise these kids to be independent and self-sufficient starts as they're young. It doesn't start when they're in high school. And trust them to handle things on their own. Trust them to talk to their teachers. I do not mess with my kids at school unless I have to. Like, they know if they've got late assignments, it's their job to talk to their teachers. It's not my job to speak for them. It Those little things, like, now's the time. Now's the time to teach them to be on their own and to be self-sufficient.
So so that brought up another question. If you're an umbrella parent, okay, and I think ultimately most umbrella parents recognize that it's not a healthy trait, in
Mm-hmm.
that they're, or not an umbrella parent, helicopter parent, excuse me,
Helicopter, yeah.
helicopter parent, and they recognize that it's not a healthy trait, but how do they stop? Like, how do they get
Mm.
over that fear of you mentioned your kids going and riding the razor. Now, I grew up riding four-wheelers. My parents were like, get out of the house, there's the four-wheelers, keys, go.
Yeah.
But we did have a buddy roll one once, so
Oh.
and he ended up being okay, but it does happen. So, like, how do you get over that fear as a mother to go, okay, I'm going to trust that they're going to be okay, and in the event that they're not, I'm going to handle it.
Well, you have to let your kids fuck up. You have to let them make mistakes, and they will, because they are human. But it's also important for them to see you making mistakes and fixing them and knowing that it's okay when it does happen. Um, when we go out on the RZR, I let my daughter drive because, number one, like, she loves it, but it's also like, I want to see how she handles things when I'm there. And um, we also talk about, like, safety things. Like, it's just little bits along the way. Like, it just teaches them, it gives them a little bit of trust, and it helps me trust them too, just a little at a time. It's not like all of a sudden, hey, I'm going to just go and I'm going to go from 0 to 60, right? Like, it's built. It's something that I don't know if you can just turn on a switch and be like, okay, now I'm going to stop being a helicopter parent. But just giving them the freedom a little at a time is really important.
Agreed. Well, Miss Liandra, I know you're a busy one. We've been on for about an hour. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
this was
think
great.
this has covered some topics that people really needed to hear on both from the women's side, the parenting side. We kind of hit the full spectrum, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. This was a really, really great conversation. I enjoyed it.
Definitely, very much so. And yeah, keep kicking ass. I'm watching your stuff regularly. I mean, you're just getting after it, and it's awesome to see.
Thanks. Yeah, I love my life. Things are good.
Well, and it sets a great example for other young women out there of going, yeah, like you said, you can go do whatever it is that you want to
And old women too. Like us old women, we got it too.
do. Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Miss Liandra, and you have an absolute blessed day.
Thanks, Michael. You too.